Hi everyone, Aaron here, Principal Coastal Engineer at International Coastal Management. I'm working on the ReBeach project, and so just going to go into a lot more detail today based on the stuff that we went over yesterday in the public workshop here at Oceanside. Thanks again to everybody who came to the event. It was a great turnout and got some really good feedback. So here's some more information. I'll start off here just by going through the feedback from the first public workshop. So what everybody was looking for was really some more details, looking at the kind of costs associated with this project, where the locations might be, what kind of timeline we're working on, things that came up with parking, definitely the downdrift impacts, if any, looking at nature-based solutions, access point, but most of all, everybody was looking for a sandy beach. As you can see on the right, there's just some evidence of one of the successful projects on the Gold Coast, and you can see back in 1972 and 1996 how similar it was to the conditions at Oceanside, and into the future how different the future has become. One of the main things that I'm really trying to bring across here in the messaging is that solving the coastal erosion issues here at Oceanside is really a three-pronged approach. We're looking at addressing the sediment supply sufficiency, so that's where sand is coming into the system, looking at the near shore, which is the area in that sort of offshore surf zone, and then at the top of the beach itself. And the solution for Oceanside is really going to be somewhere in the middle, so it's addressing all three of these key points. So based on the results from the first public workshop we had two main approaches. One we called approach A, which was a natural sort of look. We had approach B, which was something a little more unique and a little more out of the box, but the general consensus was to follow the approach A, which was the more natural approach. Here you can see in the example, there's an actual natural example of what we're talking about here. It's a little headland with some rocky outcrops, some sandbars, and dune vegetation that goes along the top of the beach. And on the right hand side is very simplistic sort of version of what we're calling the speed bump approach. So it's really allowing that natural sand flow and movement to go up and down the coast, but when you put these sort of speed bump elements into the mix, they slow down that process in here in Oceanside, which is going to slow down the sand movement and retain sand for a longer period of time. So as part of the ReBeach project, there's really three key elements here that need to be addressed. One is the actual physical design itself. The second is the longer lasting term effects and the adaptability for the coastline. And one is the scalability. How could this pilot project actually be scaled up to, address the rest of Oceanside's shoreline? And us as a coastal engineering company with experience in this before, we're basically just saying, we're able to address the physical design by pulling in elements of, coastal engineering designs and structures that we know work in the real world. The experience that we have doing these kinds of pilot projects and monitoring these real world experiences to know what to look out for and how to improve on things going forward. And we've specifically designed this pilot project at Oceanside to be scalable. So it's very compartmentalized, so it can literally be copied and pasted all the way down the coastline. So we'll get more into that as we go. And we'll jump straight in here because I've only got 15 minutes, so I'm going to kind of jump through this, and especially there'll be some key elements where there's going to be a lot of information. So that's good about this presentation, be able to stop and read it at your own pace. But first, let's look at the sand, because the sand is really what we're after here in Oceanside. So we'll talk about the sand on the top of the beach. Really, at the moment, in some sections, like at the Strand, there's some existing beach. In a lot of sections along the coast, somewhere like Oceanside Boulevard, there's no beach at all. So what kind of volume of sand do we need to put on the beach? It's quite a significant amount of sand that needs to be placed. So somewhere like the Strand, we're looking at about 4,000 square feet for every feet of beach that you need to go, and somewhere down like Oceanside Boulevard where there's no beach, it's obviously more sand. We're looking at a design slope here of about 1 in 30, which is what we've used on the Gold Coast, and basically the top of the beach to come right up to the level of the Strand. That's also tied into our design experience from places like the Gold Coast, where the top of the beach at a minimum should really be at the Strand level. Ideally it would be higher, but we'll get into that as well going forward. So then we're looking in our design really based on experience of nourishing large-scale beaches. There's 2 ways you can do it. One is to put the sand on the beach itself. This is called onshore nourishing, which is also needs to be done at Oceanside. But in addition to the onshore nourishment, we're also looking at putting sand in the near shore. This is in the basically replicating a natural sandbar. There's a couple of reasons we're going to do this. One is because it's significantly less expensive to put sand in the nearshore area. And the other one is that sand placed in the nearshore area has been proven to actually move into the inshore over time. So it's kind of doing the work for us, but it's doing it naturally. And actually the quality of sand placed in the nearshore area is actually a little less crucial than the sand placed right on the shore. The sand placed right on the shore, you really want to have nice quality sand. The more fines you have in it, the more likely the bigger volume is going to wash away after the first couple of storms. So that's kind of the reason we're doing this nearshore nourishment as well as the onshore nourishment. And I've got a little QR code here on the left-hand side of the screen if anybody wants to look more into the sort of the scientific processes of nearshore nourishment and how it's worked successfully for us on the Gold Coast and other places around the world. You can check that out. And then after each sort of element, we're kind of doing this table of like a checklist of how the design of each element going into this Oceanside project basically hits the criteria. So we're looking at the physical performance, we're looking at the cost associated, how it affects the environmental and social and regional aspects. So just to give you a quick indication, these are some of the costs associated with just putting sand into the pilot project area. I'll leave it to you to press pause here and read through at your own leisure, because I got to keep moving. We're still talking about sand here. This is really addressing that first part in our 3-pronged approach, looking at the sediment intake into the system. So right now, there's unnatural blockages into the longshore sand transport here at Oceanside, one of them being the harbour at the Camp Pendleton. So we're looking at introducing a bypassing system, which would literally pump sand from the north side of the Oceanside harbour down onto the beaches at Oceanside. And the bypassing system is a super efficient and successful way of really being able to control the longshore sand flow within an area. And on the Gold Coast, we actually have 2, one at the very south and one at the very north. What would that look like here at Oceanside? Conceptually, it can be as simple as this little sort of step block shown on which could run along the Strand. An example here with people they're actually sitting on a little step, and inside that step, there's a bypassing pipeline. There's a couple of reasons you do that. One, you get the added benefit of increasing the back of the beach height just a little bit, so you can then bring up the beach sand height as well and not have it kind of blow onto the road. So you get a bit of wind protection, additional bit of storm protection. You can use it as a seat, and it makes it easier for maintenance on the pipe itself over time. To pipe the sand from the north side of the Oceanside Harbour all the way down to Oceanside Boulevard, we're looking at around 3 booster pump stations. What would that look like? They're about the size of a shipping container. The pumps could also be electric, so they can run on electric sources, and they run a lot quieter. Just to tie them in to the top of the beach as well, you could maybe turn them into a stepped sort of thing, like this example here on the right, which has a booster pump station underneath. And then at the top of the beach, which we'll go into again, we've also added a bit of a green vegetation barrier. So again, looking how the bypassing system sort of ties into the design criteria of ReBeach. We've gone through each of the different design criteria, whereas we're kind of looking at just introducing the infrastructure for the bypassing system in the pilot section, looking around that sort of price range there. The actual bypassing system itself is probably beyond the scope of the pilot budget, but then could come into consideration going forward as a kind of a regional split cost. But we think as part of the pilot project, just getting in the infrastructure, which would reduce the ongoing maintenance costs, which is done by dredging the harbour every year and setting up pipelines along the beach. It can just kind of neaten that up and make it much more efficient. So we'll keep moving forward. We're heading now to the top of the beach, looking at the top of the beach speed bump. Here, obviously at the top of the beach, we're talking about putting some dune vegetation in between that barrier, between the Strand Road, and looking around sort of like a 15 feet wide dune area. This whole headland could really be parkland and green space, and it would have a sort of a rock, engineered rock design, but it doesn't need to be necessarily an exposed rock surface. It could be sort of half vegetated with stairs coming down, kind of like the example shown. And what's really interesting, at the end of the headland, we're actually looking at collecting all of the cobble that's scattered all along the beach here at Oceanside. And the cobble is actually quite mobile. There's been quite a few studies done on the cobble itself, and the cobble rocks can actually move quite significant distances up and down the beach. So to kind of contain that and make it into a usable construction element, we're thinking of basically containing it in these rock bags and putting it on the end of the headland to create this kind of natural looking low permeable berm, which is actually adjustable. So part of the pilot project going forward, if we need to reduce the amount of sand flow that's going around the headland, we can add more cobble bags. If we want to increase the amount of sand flow going around the headlands, we can pull out some of those cobble bags and increase the sand flow basically. And again, just going through that example of the headland and how that can tick all of the design criteria here for Oceanside, giving a look at some of the performance goals in the 3 to 15 year period, looking at the costs, potential maintenance of moving these rubble bags around, how it affects the environment, the social benefits you get from having a green space right next to the beach. And here we're talking about the offshore speed bump, which is the artificial reef, something that we have a lot of experience with as well. So the real sort of draw card for having an artificial reef as an offshore speed bump is for it to slow down the movement of that nearshore nourishment in the sandbar and kind of act as an offshore speed bump. It also, improves the sand retention around the reef itself and reduces those heavy storm waves. But you're also creating a huge habitat and marine environment, which can lead on to many additional benefits, not just for the locality of the reef itself, but sort of regionally. At the moment, there's two sort of main options we're looking at for the constructability of the reef, and whether it be rock or large sand-filled containers. I think probably as a pilot project, it's probably going to lean more towards the sand-filled containers, but that'll come down to cost benefit going forward. I've also put in a little QR code here if you want to stop it and go back and get some more information about artificial reefs and how they work and some successful examples. Here again, just looking at the design performance and what are expected, key performance indicators of the reef itself. We're looking at coastal protection, the amenity, both as a beach and the surf amenity, and safety plays a big factor. So designing these artificial reefs for public use, safety is a big factor that we have to take in. And so bringing all of the history from doing one of these projects before, we're able to ensure that the design's done in such a way to give us the benefits that we want without creating hazardous conditions for people around it. So pulling all those elements together here, we've got a kind of final overlay of how these elements tie in together. You can see on the top of the beach here, we're putting the yellow, that's the onshore nourishment. We got the little headlands with the rubbly outcrops. They're our top of the beach speed bumps. Then we go out, we've got an artificial reef in the middle there. That becomes our offshore speed bump. And on either side of the reef, we've got nearshore sand nourishment. And that's done with the nearshore sand placement. And again, looking at how all of these elements and this pilot project are able to be measured and adjusted as need be going forward. So here's probably a good place for you to pause and take a look at it again. So just reiterating here that, we're basically recreating a natural existing coastal dynamic by introducing the headland, the rubbly berm, the storm bars, the reef, and the top of the dune vegetation, and introducing the sand source supply there with the bypassing system. So these kind of headland interactions are really successful in the natural world, and they're already existing here in Southern California. So it's really just about breaking up that long stretch of coastline with this kind of speed bumpy type of approach, which is, essentially recreating the natural environment. And just to reiterate on that, by having those headlands and speed bumping the top of the beach sand movement, you're allowing time for the dune vegetation to really take hold. Having the offshore speed bump with the reef, you're allowing that sort of re-nourished profile to hold. And it's also creating really good habitat, which will sort of lead out and improve the general marine environment in the area. And this is just looking how the project itself as an overall kind of captures the design objectives here in the ReBeach program, looking at the physical, financial, environmental, social, and regional aspects of them in the short term and the long term. There's obviously a lot to go through here, so it's a good time to press pause and take a look. And now this is really just sort of a futuristic look here of how the project itself, the pilot project here at Oceanside, could really be scaled up. So once the monitoring process has gone through and we can really see how the effects of the nearshore nourishment, see the effects of the sand sort of moving its way around the headland, we can basically copy and paste that sort of design all the way down the beach here at Oceanside to get that really sort of nice, natural looking, broken up, speed bumped, literal drift. It's also creating new green spaces all along the beachfront, not only on the beach, but in the offshore. So you're creating this whole new element of green space here in Oceanside. And I just want to wrap it up. That's all the time we got. It's already maybe a little bit over, but if you're going to take anything away from this presentation, it's basically our approach is really a speed bump approach. We won't want to stop the natural processes that are happening here. We just want to slow things down, retain sand here in Oceanside just a little bit longer, while also improving the environment by giving some offshore elements and creating some, green parkland spaces here on the beach to, improve the accessibility and, create that connection to the ocean. And one more thing is, we're bringing elements from our experience that we know are going to work. So we want to, take this through and make sure it's going to work here in Oceanside, because we know it will. So thanks very much for your attention. And you can here again scan this little QR code if you want to learn a little more about us and what we do. And thanks very much for your time. Cheers.